Hi, I'm Linda Quinlan.
I'd be Keith Ghostland.
I'm Ann Charles. Welcome to All Things LGBTQ. It's January 14th, 2020, and we'd like to begin with headlines, starting with Linda.
Well, hi.
Hi.
Good evening, everybody. I have a few headlines. And gay man dies at Louisville bar. Trump attempts at firing HIV-positive airmen has been blocked again. New Jersey schools begin LGBTQ inclusion curriculum. Arizona politician kills a gay man, while another bill targets transgender students. Alaska considers an LGBTQ category for hate crime. The movie Parasite dominates LGBT critics' Dorian Awards with 5 wins. Boyd George called transphobic for hating on modern pronoun use. He was noticed as saying, "Leave your pronouns at the door." Julian Michaels, a lesbian fitness guru, shames Lizzo and gets slammed on Twitter. Rocket Man and Pain and Glory get Oscar nod, but straight men's stories still rule. The L-Word Generation Q lands a second season, and Rush Limbaugh asks, "Is Pete Buttigieg gay?" as he claims, because he doesn't look gay.
Is Rush looking for a dating opportunity?
Maybe.
You heard it here first.
Oh,
We've reported on Stranger Things.
I know. Florida football coach uses slur. Taylor Swift and Janet Mock are GLAAD's 2020 celeb heroes. I have a little story about Martina Navratilova and Margaret Court. And a few other little stories, one about Amy Klobuchar and the Department of Health. So we will get onto those if we have time. So there we go. Keith.
My Mondays are Martina. just saying it now. Trivia. Burlington Free Press, December 2009. Vermonter of the Year. Came out of the LGBTQ community. And they both got it.
Uh-huh.
We're going to talk a bit about events happening in the area.
I might say this is the first time.
Your secret was safe with me. We're going to talk about local events, and then a reminder of some of the statewide events to keep track of. And yes, indeed, they're back. So we're going to talk a little bit about legislation, some of them that are of importance to us, where they stand, and some interesting bills that have been introduced.
I have a page worth of headlines. They are as follows.
You have pages.
And pages of follow-up, yes. But I'll try to shorten them. Good news from Brazil. Chile transgender rights law takes effect. South Africa, transgender activist Nere Mfela murdered. Same-sex relationships are taboo in China, but an Alibaba ad is challenging that. Poll reveals rising support for LGBT rights in Hong Kong. Good news from Pakistan. A Liberal Democrat MP, Layla Moran, has revealed that she's in a relationship with a woman and identifies as pansexual. And if I don't get to that story, let me show you the picture now. This is Layla Moran and her girlfriend, Rosie Cobb. And Layla has the dark hair. But I hope to expatiate a little later. Polish left-wing appoints gay candidate Robert Biedron for presidential elections. And he's been on the Polish scene before. He's founder of the Spring Party. He's openly gay. He's a real force for good. Belize Court of, well, let's look at a picture of him now, if we could. Robert Biedron. Belize Court of Appeal upholds ruling that struck down the sodomy law. So that's good news from Belize. Here's a unpleasant story from the Vatican. State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith was warned at the Vatican for holding hands with his husband, Jarek Mediaville. So let's take a look at them. This is a picture. Representative Smith is on the right. The Vatican official, security person, warned them and said, if you keep holding hands, you'll be fined or worse. They both were raised Catholic. They have pointed remarks about their upbringing in this particular activity.
I was going to say, the Vatican should be breathing a sigh of relief. They were merely holding hands, and they were both consenting adults. And shame on you.
Well, and I have thoughts about the Vatican that I won't share at the moment. Britain's, and this is an awful story, Britain's most prolific rapist spent 12 years drugging and assaulting young men until one of the men woke up. And I have a picture of him. I debated about it because, he's really a creepy, awful person. But anyway, there he is. His name is Reinhard Sinaga. He's 36, originally from Indonesia.
How many people did he kill?
Oh, he raped about 190 people.
Wow.
And what happened was one of his he drugged them and raped them. They were mostly in fact, all heterosexual.
Wow.
And one of them woke up in the middle of the assault and grabbed his phone, and he taped all these activities, and people are still coming forward.
Wow.
Horrible.
Yeah.
And let's end with some bad news. Same-sex marriage remains banned in the Philippines. So those are my headlines.
Okay. So that's...
Move
yeah,
on to you.
when I saw that London thing, or that English thing, I thought, oh my God.
Yeah,
this
it was
is just
Manchester.
horrible, horrible. Okay, a gay man dies at a Louisville bar, but no charges have been filed. His family has hired a lawyer to see if there was some negligence by the bar. Christopher McKinney, 35, was being escorted out of the bar for being unruly when he had a scuffle with a bar employee. When police arrived at 1:15 a.m., they found him unconscious. He died of blunt force trauma injuries. So maybe someone hit him with a beer bottle or something, or I don't know. But, so there may be more news about that. And Trump's attempt to fire HIV-positive airmen has been blocked again. An appeals court says that Trump's administration's effort to discharge the airmen is at odds with common science of HIV. The appeals court upheld the lower court's decision. The administration has sought to discharge the two airmen on the grounds that they will not be ready to go to the Middle East if deployed. But both men show no symptoms, are taking medication, and have been pronounced physically fit by their doctors. So he has no grounds to stand on, and of course it will be appealed again, so we will keep you informed about what happens there. Jillian Michaels, lesbian fitness guru, shames Lizzo and gets slammed on Twitter. Michaels, the former trainer of The Biggest Loser, continues to have harmful narratives about health and beauty. Alec Berg of AM2DM said that he loved that women like Ashley Graham and Lizzo are helping to change the narrative about health and beauty. Michael said in response, "Why are we celebrating her body? 'Cause it ain't going to be awesome when she gets diabetes. I'm just being honest. I love her music, but there is never a moment when I say, like, I'm glad she's overweight."
Who asked her?
We've heard from the peanut gallery.
Well, really?
And it seems that Rocket Man and Pain and Glory got Oscar nods, but straight men's stories rule. Not to mention that no women were nominated for Best Directors, even though there were films in which they directed. Two straight actors got a nod for their gay or lesbian roles. Antonio Banderas for Best Actor And Margot Robbie for Best Supporting Actor. The Joker sent, and these are the ones that have been nominated for Best Movie. The Joker was centers on male rage. And once upon a time in Hollywood, and this is a spoiler if you haven't seen it, he has possibly killed his wife and kills female Manson followers in the movie. So, anyway, that's that. So, I will get on to the other stories later, but Keith, now you.
Well, let me pause. May I speak now?
Yeah.
Out of turn? I watched the Golden Globes, and it was the same thing. No
Yeah,
female
I know.
directors.
Yeah.
The only thing is Ellen was nominated for the Carol Burnett Prize, and Kate Clinton gave her the award and started crying when she was talking about how Ellen inspired her, and she was working out in her basement, and she saw Ellen, an open lesbian, and thought maybe I'm a lesbian, and she kind of broke down.
Yeah.
And so, anyway.
And Ellen gave a very funny speech. But anyway.
Yeah, but it was, mostly straight white men.
Yep.
Which leads us right into Wednesday, January 22nd, 6:30, Kellogg Hubbard Library, sponsored by the League of Women Voters. Implicit bias training and discussion.
Oh.
Being led by Bora Yang, who is the executive director of the Human Rights Commission.
It looks interesting.
What are all of those racial, gender, classist that's tucked away there that keeps coming out, for which you may or may not be aware
Right.
of how it's influencing your decisions? And again, Saturday, January 25th, at the Chandler Drag, the play written in the 1920s by Mae West that was closed for indecency, and this is a fundraiser for Vermont Cares. Monday, February 3rd at the Kellogg Hubbard Library, the LGBTQ film and book series. It was part of your interview with Nancy Schultz. The book discussion is Girls Made of Stars, and there are copies of the book available at the library. And then on Wednesday, February 12th, 6:30 p.m., again, League of Women Voters. They've got some interesting seminars coming up. Racial bias in Vermont's criminal justice system. Should be fascinating. And then sort of ongoing, remember, Larks and Raven, Gender Free Contra Dancing, Capital City Grange, 1st, 3rd, and if there's a 5th Saturday of the month, thank you, our friend Aaron. Out in the Opens Radio Hour, you can podcast it. Brown and Out podcast. One of the things that came up at the town hall forums when we were going around the state is that Vermont's LGBTQ community of color look to this podcast as being their only voice within our community. And then remember, at the Pride Center of Vermont, Wednesdays at 4:30, social gathering LGBTQ plus people with disabilities.
Where is this? The
Pride
Great-
Center
Oh,
in
the Pride
Burlington.
Center. Okay.
Every Wednesday at 4:30.
Okay.
Let's go to Brazil with some good news.
Then I'm willing.
Yes, we've been talking about the whole Netflix squabble about the film Gay Jesus on Netflix.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, now a judge has ruled that it's okay. So the president of the Supreme Court on Thursday issued an order that allows streaming service Netflix to continue exhibiting a satirical film depicting Jesus as a gay man and reaffirm Brazilians' right to free speech.
Oh, good for them.
Yes. The judge said it's not to be assumed that a humorous satire has the magic power to undermine the values of Christian faith, whose existence goes back more than 2,000 years.
Good for them.
Those were his remarks.
Will they be stoned as they go in to watch it?
I don't think so. Remember they threw gasoline
Yeah.
opponents threw gasoline bombs
Yeah.
and Molotov cocktails on
Yeah.
Christmas Eve?
I was going to say it all depends on your definition of stoned, because remember, we are debating cannabis here.
Yes.
Porta dos Fundos that put it on said in a statement it stands against any act of censorship, violence, illegality, authoritarianism, and all the things we no longer expected to have to repudiate in 2020. Our job is to make humor. And so now the judge has ruled that people can watch
Good.
them. Also in Brazil, The age for gender reassignment has been lowered. Trans youths, can now get medical treatment from age 16 and surgery at 18 under a relaxation of rules hailed as a big step forward. Brazil's independent medical regulator announced the new rules. The age that trans people can have gender reassignment surgery, it's from 18 for 21, from 18 to 21. You can use puberty blockers for the first time if you're 16 to 18 years old. The progressive rule changes were the latest in a string of advancements for trans people in the South American country.
Is this Brazil you're saying, right?
I'm saying Brazil.
Don't they still have the highest rate of transgender murders?
A lot, yes.
Yeah.
130, I think.
Yeah.
There are 200 million people, had the highest number of trans murders globally. That's the population of the country, at 130 in the 12 months ending in September, so it's bad. But there's good news from Chile about transgender rights. Friday was a historic moment for transgender rights in Chile because the country's gender identity law came into force. Trans people who are at least 18 and single can now change their name and legal gender with a simple procedure in the country's civil registry. Teenagers who are between 14 and 18 can do so in court, but the new law does not include trans children and adolescents who are under 14. Today alone, we have 136 people who will complete that procedure throughout Chile. Justice Human Rights Minister Hernan Lorraine said. Daniel Vega, who was in that film Fantastic Woman that was nominated for the awards, applauded it. Another 921 people are already registered to exercise the right to change their identity in the next few days. The trans actress Daniela Vega said this following message on Instagram. I dedicate this day to the beautiful conquest of ruling the name, she wrote. I dedicate this day to those who did not see it arrive, to their bodies dignified by memory of rebellion. And speaking of memories of rebellion, transgender activist Nare Mfela, her picture is now before you. She was found murdered on Sunday. She won a landmark discrimination against her high school, which had bullied her and harassed her and humiliated her. Friends and fellow advocates describe her as being a selfless, determined, and outspoken advocate for transgender rights. South African police have taken in her boyfriend but then released him. Some believe her murder may have been a hate crime. So there's her picture. May I go on to my next story?
One more story, I think, Ann, and then we'll have to move on.
Well, this is a very exciting story involving China and a clip. There is a new commercial for one of China's largest online marketplaces. It never says the words gay rights, but it's making waves online for what appears to be a subtle challenge to one of the country's major taboos. The 23-second ad, although I'm going to show it, it's a minute and 19 seconds, begins when a young man brings another man home for the holidays and introduces him as Kevin. Two girls in the home respond by giggling and gossiping, presumably a sister and a sister's friend. At dinner, the father hands Kevin a bowl of soup, and he responds by saying, "Thanks, Dad," creating an awkward moment of surprise. The video caught fire this week when it was posted on the Chinese social media website Weibo. That's the Chinese pronunciation that I looked up. It has millions of views and has been liked on Weibo 10,000 times. And it's also garnered more than 4,500 comments, many of them positive. So let's look at that clip. There's a little instructional component.
This
also.
isn't a Chinese government thing. This is like some
It's a commercial interest.
Okay.
But they don't say gay rights, so they're getting under the radar. But it's the radar. But it's obvious, as you'll see from the
Okay,
clip.
let's see the clip.
哇，这是 Kevin 阿姨，新年好。
进来进来，
今晚有瓜吃了。
吃什么瓜呀？来吃瓜子。
新年更有新年味。
别客气，刚自己见。谢谢爸。
吃瓜。
哇，这是 Kevin 阿姨，新年好。别客气，刚自己见。谢谢爸。
Nice clip.
I could go on about homosexuality
No,
in China.
I think we have to move now.
Okay.
You'll have more time.
Okay, good.
Okay, so Martina Navratilova and Margaret Court have a discussion or argument over Court's transphobic sermon. Apparently, Court is now a minister. Did anybody know that?
No.
Yeah, I know. And she's got her own church. And she has been making a lot of sermons around homophobic attacks on trans athletes as well as other trans people. And Martina accused her, longtime rival, of using religion to justify hate. However, Martina at one point got criticism herself, suggesting that trans women competing in women's sports was cheating. She has since apologized. So there you go about that. Homophobic Brian Fisher says this. I'm sorry for laughing, but you know, this is really.
Well, tell us, then we can all laugh.
Homophobic Brian Fisher says the Nazi Party started
at a gay bar.
in a gay bar.
The beer hold putsch.
The American Family commentator is still talking about his bizarre tale that that this bar and Nazism, that being gay was the origins of Nazism. It started in a gay bar in Munich, Germany, he insists. And I can tell you just what bar it was, of course, and he never said it.
Well, we passed that bar when we were in Munich.
Yeah, did
The
that
side
look
of
like
the
a gay
beer
bar
hall
to you?
putsch. Huh?
That looked like a gay bar to you?
It looked like a dive.
Yeah.
He's hanging out in gay bars?
Huh?
He's hanging out in gay bars?
I guess he is, because he
Yeah.
knows exactly where that bar is.
It didn't look like a gay bar, though, to me.
Well, and then there's the other evangelical who said that the reason they're having the wildfires in Australia
Yeah.
is because he was banned from visiting the country.
That's Stephen Anderson,
Yes.
Yeah.
on whom I've reported.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, dear God. Illinois Health Department is upgrading birth certificate system to affirm trans parents.
Yes.
The system will no longer automatically refer to the parent who gives birth as a mother or co-parent. Miles Brady Davis, a trans masculine, gave birth to a daughter, Zane, and wanted to be listed as the father who gave birth to their daughter. So that's pretty interesting. And Amy Kochaba.
Klobuchar.
Klobuchar?
Klobuchar.
Amy.
Amy is under fire for a vote to confirm an anti-LGBTQ judge during the Obama administration.
Oh.
She confirmed David Ryan Strass, who has objected to the Supreme Court's ruling striking down anti-sodomy laws. She said her vote was based on the reality that given the choices she had, on balance, she thought he was the better of all the choices that she had. She also said that she suggested other candidates to the White House for the appeals court position, but defended her vote to confirm. So,
Not good enough, Amy.
I know. Let me see. Oh, Marvel is going to get its own transgender superhero very soon, says the president of Marvel Studios. I know you all find that very exciting. Let's see. And then we have Arizona politician kills a gay band while another bill targets transgender students. State Senator Sylvia Allen has filed a bill to prohibit and strike down all references to homosexuality from state statutes that define sexual conduct and to ban any sex education for students before the 7th grade. State Representative John Fillmore has filed legislation targeting trans and non-binary people, requiring any public school employee, when dealing with pupils, to only use pronouns that could correspond with their birth certificates.
So kills a gay, what was your headline? I didn't understand it. Kills a gay band? Or ban?
Yeah, the band. Yeah.
Kills the ban.
Yeah, the gay ban.
So abolishes the ban. So that
No, she wants to remove all reference in the use of the word homosexuality from anything in a public school environment.
Because
so kills gay references.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Not
Right.
gay ban.
Gay ban. Yeah.
Ban's gay. All right. All right.
Moving on.
And the other one, was the pronoun. So anyway, moving on.
Oh, well, I'm glad that's clarified.
So very quickly, two bills of interest that we were following last year, looking at what was happening when they went back into session. S-23 minimum wage. The bill that was proposed is so far removed from the $15 per hour that we thought they were working towards. The bill as it came over from the Senate would only have gotten us to $12.20 an hour by 2021. Current minimum wage is $10.96. In 2016, the legislative study said that a minimum for a livable wage was $13 an hour.
I'm surprised
That was
it's not like 20.
2016. We're looking at $12.20. The House refused to concur, so they're in conference committee. The people on the House side are Anthony Stevens, who is the chair of General and Housing from Waterbury, Mary Hooper from Montpelier, and John Kolacki of South Burlington. From the Senate is Michael Sorokin from Chittenden County, Becca Ballant from Wyndham, Allison Clarkson from Windsor.
What's the issue? I mean, is it a business related, like it's not good for small business, or what's?
That was the contention and why it got weakened, is that the Vermont business community, small businesses, could not support it. They could not endure that much of an increase in wage.
Did you see the study promoted by Democracy Now! That said every dollar the minimum wage goes up diminishes suicide rates?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are a wealth of studies. I mean, just looking at our community, by our being below the livable wages, the minimum wage in the state of Vermont, and how we in the LGBTQ plus community are underemployed and underpaid, greater than a quarter of our families live below the poverty level. So it has a direct impact on us.
And every dollar goes back into the community anyway. I
Exactly.
mean,
So the other bill was H-107, which was paid family and medical leave. What came over from the Senate was down to a maximum of 12 weeks of combined family and/or medical leave within a calendar year.
Do you mean combined mother or
No,
father?
no. There is family leave and then medical leave.
Okay.
Family leave is you are going to take care of a family member or you are bringing a child into your home.
Right.
Medical leave is for your own personal
Okay.
health. So they've dropped the maximum that you could use from both categories to a total of 12 weeks within a calendar year, of which 8 weeks could be for family care and 6 weeks for your medical leave. However, if you were going to choose to and you were bringing a new child into your household, you could use all 12 weeks for bonding care. And again, the House refused to concur. It's in committee of conference. It's the same people assigned from the Senate to work on this bill in the committee of conference: Michael Sorokin, Becca Ballant, Allison Clarkson. On the House side, little interesting mix: Anthony Stevens, Robin Shue, who is from Middlebury, and Deanna Gonzalez. So several bills of interest that were introduced at the beginning of the session. One is H464. Lead sponsor is Brian Chena, who was one of our out members. This is the bill that would require law enforcement training on appropriate use of force, de-escalation tactics, and cross-cultural awareness, and it would require all law enforcement agencies to do data collection on when they use force and the circumstances involved, including racial and gender breakdowns. And it would make the Criminal Justice Training Council come up with a model policy on when and how you could use force. And then each law enforcement agency would need to adopt it. Two other bills that were of interest: H568, lead sponsor was Maxine Grad. This is an act relating to human trafficking and prostitution. And what this bill would do is that if you, as a sex worker, were involved in a crime while you were engaged in that practice and you reported it to the police, you would have immunity from prosecution for your sex work. So if you were beaten by your client, you could then report the assault without having to worry that by disclosing that it was sex trade, you now are
You'd
subject
be
to
okay,
prosecution.
yeah.
Because at one point in time, there were some of our state's attorneys who felt that people that they knew were in human trafficking, charging them and incarcerating them because they thought that was how you kept them safe and pulled them out of trafficking, by charging them with a felony and incarcerating. The other bill is H569. Lead sponsor is Celine Coburn. Co-sponsors are Diana Gonzalez, Maxine Grad, Emily Kornheiser, and this would totally decriminalize consenting adult sex prostitution. It would keep any act relating to a minor or human trafficking or coercion as a felony, but it would be, sex work would be legal in the state of Vermont.
It'd be like Amsterdam on Church Street.
I was thinking more Berry Street in the senior center, but
Oh, my.
I got plans for you.
Okay, let's go to Hong Kong, if we could. A poll has revealed rising support for LGBT rights in Hong Kong. An academic conducted a poll which indicated that opposition to legal protections for Hong Kong's sexual minorities is on the wane. A university survey showed on Tuesday. The professor behind it called on the government to wake up to reality. Only 12% of the 1,058 people polled in a Chinese university study last year objected to laws preventing discrimination against LGBT people, down from 35% in 2016. Public support for same-sex marriage has also risen from 27% to 44% during the same period. The share of people against it fell to 20% from 34%. This may be a little confusing, all these statistics.
They
But
are
let
to
me
me, but that's,
I know. Now that your eyes have glazed over, let me summarize. Raymond Chan, Hong Kong's only openly gay legislator, who is pictured before you now, says of these survey, the government can no longer use the excuse that there is controversy on the topic to delay the legislative process for enacting legal protection for sexual minorities in Hong Kong.
there you go.
Understanding of transgender issues has also increased, this professor said. Some 74% of respondents said they had heard the term transgender, up 8 percentage points from the finding of a survey conducted by the University of Hong Kong in 2017. The professor attributed that to the increasing number of LGBT-related court cases in recent years, while the plight of transgender people entered the mainstream in 2018 thanks to the Hong Kong film Tracy, starring Philip Kung Homan, who portrayed a middle-aged man struggling to adapt to life as a transgender woman. So the media, legal action, recognition is increasing in Hong Kong.
Visibility in general.
Good news from Pakistan is going to provide free health care for trans people. It's extended the government health insurance plan.
Didn't they just get rid of their prime minister or whoever the head of the government is in Pakistan?
I don't think so, but
No? Maybe.
I'll
I heard
look it up.
something about that recently. Yeah.
You're not thinking of Taiwan that just elected the pro-LGBT.
Maybe I am.
Head of
I'm
state.
not sure. Go ahead. Sorry.
So this transgender plan has been extended for the first time in a move aimed at ending discrimination and access to care. All transgender people are now eligible for medical treatment, including reconstructive surgery under the plan, which was set up to enable poor and marginalized communities in Pakistan to access health care. Prime Minister Imran Khan said he was taking responsibility for trans people who are routinely denied treatment. At least this is a step to combat social exclusion in the deeply conservative Muslim majority country where homosexuality remains a crime. Problem is, you have to register as a third gender to be eligible for this, and the climate is so hostile, a lot of people aren't registering. But it's a step.
And then once you've registered, they know who we are and they know where we live, so
Yeah.
they know where to find us.
Only 2,500 trans people are currently registered, and also trans activists said only a few transgender people know about this, and the first step is to spread the word. So it's just the beginning. But there's more good news from Pakistan, if I may.
You may.
Share it with you. It involves the first transgender beauty salon in Karachi.
Yeah.
I have a picture now of Bibo Haider, 35, who has decided to start her own salon, Trawa, which opened its doors in January. I thought, why not open a community-led salon where trans people serve not only their community members, but mainstream society as well, she said. This is how we can bridge the gap between society and the trans community. It not only serves transgender customers, but also aims to provide a livelihood for transgender people. We don't get a chance to make money in a respectable manner, and opportunities are limited. Through the salon's name, Haider pays homage to the culture and transitions of the transgender community. Trawa is the code word we use, a slang term which the transgender community In the transgender community, it means makeup or makeover. She adds, when people visit the salon, they will ask what it means, and there will be dialogue and exchange, which is exactly what I wanted.
Great.
So that's good news from Pakistan.
Yes, it is. Now, don't we have a rock star interview?
Well, we certainly do. It's my great honor to introduce Justice Beth Robinson. Hello, I'm here with Beth Robinson, Justice Robinson, one of the 10 openly LGBT state Supreme Court justices in the U.S. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You were the co-counsel in the Baker versus Vermont in 1999, which was the civil union bill in which 3 same-sex couples sued the state after being denied marriage licenses in Milton, Shelburne, and South Burlington. Then you went on to be involved in the Marriage Equality Act of 2009. You're a very illustrious figure in Vermont history. And then you personally got married in 2010.
Yes, I did.
But before we get to all of that, let's talk about you personally, if you wouldn't mind. You grew up in Indiana, in Bloomington. Can you tell us a little what that was like?
Sure. I was in Bloomington until I was 12, and then I moved to a town outside of Indianapolis. So about half my childhood in Bloomington and half in Indianapolis. And it was a suburban, nice, uneventful life. Wasn't a particularly politically active life or anything like that. It was just a kid who liked sports.
Sports. It wasn't really conservative, or you didn't really notice?
You know, I didn't notice at the time. I was just a kid, but sure, in retrospect, you know, Indiana's a red state, and that's was true. But Bloomington is kind of a, at least at the time, was kind of a liberal college enclave, and so, you know, I guess it canceled out. I didn't grow up with a great sense of consciousness of politics.
I remember I spent some time in Indiana, as we said, and Bloomington was the mecca for liberals. Then you went to Dartmouth, which was a switch to the East Coast from the Midwest, and you graduated in 1986. We talk about that as the Bowers versus Hardwick decision date, but you weren't particularly politically involved at that point.
No, you know, there was active political engagement on campus when I was there, both people organizing around South Africa and divestiture, and then people organizing in opposition to that. And there was a lot of shouting. And I'm a little bit embarrassed in retrospect that I didn't really engage. But I also have to admit that I wasn't drawn to that style of debate.
Mm-hmm. What was your major?
Philosophy and government, double major.
I see. Well, that prepared you for your law career, which began at University of Chicago in 1989. That's when you got your law degree.
Yep.
Is that right? And then when did you move to Vermont? Oh, one more thing, if I may ask you. Speaking of Chicago, was there anything of personal significance that occurred at the University of Chicago during your law school time there?
Sure, a lot of things did, but I came out in law school, and I think
out.
that obviously has been an important factor for the rest of my life since then.
I came out in Indiana during my MA program. When did you move to Vermont?
Moved to Vermont February 1st, 1993.
And how did you happen to come here?
You know, I had spent a summer here in law school working for a law firm, Lang Roxbury & Wool in Middlebury, and it was everything I wanted in a law practice. And so even though I spent a few years after law school in Washington, D.C., I always knew I'd come back to Vermont and work at Lang Rock, which I did.
Everything you want in a law practice. Would you elaborate, please?
Yeah, it was a small town firm, but not too small.
Mm-hmm.
Folks at the firm represented people in all kinds of cases and all kinds of people, and so there was a real variety. I think in cities there tends to be more of a tendency to specialize in the law. You know, you're a firm that does this narrow thing or this narrow thing, and in a lot of the bigger firms, your clients are mostly institutional, which is fine. I have nothing against institutional clients, but I loved the real world, day-to-day lives of ordinary people who came through my office and had ordinary problems and needed lawyers for those kinds of things. And so that's what I loved.
My first job after college was in a Wall Street law firm. I was a paralegal.
Oh, wow.
And you're right, it's a whole different world.
I spent some time in a firm like that before I moved up here, and it was great, but I was ready to be here.
Yeah, I could see the impulse. Tell me, how did you become an activist?
You know, in my law practice, I was just a young attorney. Susan Murray, who was a partner at the firm and was older than I was at the time, had a lot of LGBTQ clients. She was an out lesbian as well. And one of the things I quickly started learning was that there were all sorts of legal challenges that people in our community faced, that there was nothing I could do as a lawyer to fix. There were no papers I could draft or no lawsuit that I could bring because the laws just didn't recognize a family where one existed. And so I saw all sorts of hardships, ranging from financial hardships, people having to pay property transfer taxes to put their partner's name on their deed just so they could have the security of having both their names in the deed, to more profound issues involving people losing their life savings because when they split up, there wasn't a court there that recognized the economic interdependence that they'd had for many years. And so all of those things motivated me, along with my colleague Susan, to begin looking for bigger answers than we could provide on a individual by individual basis. Susan had the opportunity to represent a couple came in. They'd actually gotten a marriage license from their town clerk, same-sex couple, and it was sort of by mistake. The clerk gave it to them, and then after they got it, the clerk called them and said, can you bring that back? And they said, not on your life. But that caused us to begin exploring a lawsuit to sue for the right to marry for same-sex couples. There had been a case in Hawaii that at that point had achieved partial success and looked like it might achieve full success. And Susan and I began talking about bringing a case in Vermont. So that was really the impetus. But that's really a lawyer answer. We realized pretty quickly that you couldn't just bring a lawsuit without doing all the activist work, all the public education and mobilizing people at the grassroots level and educating legislators. And so, along with a number of other people, we co-founded the Vermont Freedom to Marry Task Force to basically till the soil for the possibility of moving forward with a marriage case eventually.
And you led that task force for 15 years, is that right?
Off and on. I didn't always have the title of chair for various reasons. Different people floated in and out, but I was always part of the leadership team.
Let's go forward, if we could, to April 7th, 2009. I think we were all in the chamber. I'm sure Keith was there, and Linda and I were there. And you were pictured in the cover of the New York Times that day. Would you mind describing what happened and what it was? See, we felt the electricity in the air, but we had no idea what had preceded it.
Sure.
So can you tell us a little about that?
Sure, and just to set the stage, after the Baker case, we ended up with the civil union law, which wasn't what we had sought in the Baker litigation. We'd sought marriage licenses for our clients, but it was also the most supportive law for same-sex couples that existed at that point anywhere in the country in terms of the legal protections. But we always knew that we would at some point come back and seek full access to civil marriage for same-sex couples. And so we started that push, I would say, around 2004. It was a long haul. And there were lots of steps, and I'm happy to talk in more detail. I know time is short. But by the time we got to 2009, we were in what I would call our final push. We knew we had enough votes to pass a marriage bill. We didn't necessarily have enough votes to override a veto if the governor sought to veto it. In all my wisdom, which was very little, I was quite confident that the governor would not veto the marriage bill and was able to persuade leadership to move forward on that assumption. And what proved to be quite embarrassing, to say the least, is that my guess about that was wrong. And the governor announced his intent to veto a marriage bill, and in fact did veto the marriage bill. So the bill passed, but it passed the House with an overwhelming majority, but not a veto-proof majority. And we basically needed to pick up 3 votes over the weekend between the vote in which it passed and the final vote to override the governor's veto, because everything moved quite fast. So that set the stage for the scene you're describing in the State House that day. And certainly folks that we worked with were out in the trenches, not in every district, but in the, maybe there were 10 districts where you're either worried about losing the vote of someone who voted for the marriage bill, but maybe they feel that they should not vote to override the veto, or you don't want to lose anybody, and you needed to gain 3 more people who actually voted against the bill, but now you want them to defend it against a veto override. So people were, we got boxes and boxes of track phones and sent activists out into those areas and knocked door to door, and people answer and you talk to them, and if they said they supported you in that, dial that representative's number, hand them the track phone, and let them talk to the representative.
That is activism.
It was very grassroots, and I have to thank Robin McGuire, who was the field director for Freedom to Marry Task Force at that time. That was really her brainchild. When we got to the State House, the fact that they held the vote suggests we thought we had the votes, because, as I'm sure you know, leadership doesn't typically invite a vote on the floor on a bill or a measure unless it's pretty confident it knows that it's got the votes to pass it. So everybody thought they had the votes, but I would say there were three votes that were quite shaky. One vote was somebody who had voted against the bill, had been persuaded to vote to defend it against the governor's override, but was so shaky that leadership asked us to make sure that none of our people spoke to him that morning in the State House. Well, I got to tell you, we had spent 15 years teaching people, thanks to our mutual friend Keith Gosland, teaching people that they should speak to their legislators anytime they have an opportunity to. So suddenly we had to get blockers to follow him from a distance to make sure that nobody from his district tried to approach him that morning to talk to him, because we were scared we'd lose that vote. There was another person who had told different people different things as to his intentions, and so even though he had told the speaker that he was going to vote to sustain to override the vote, the veto, we didn't really know. There was another. Let's just say that there were 3 people who were very much in play, and they all happened to be sort of at the end of the alphabet. So it made that roll call very painful because we didn't know exactly for sure that it was going to come out until it did.
I have 2 questions that I'll try to slip in. The first is, this vote made Vermont the first state to establish legal recognition of same-sex marriage by legislation rather than as a result of the court ruling. What's the significance of that, if you wouldn't mind?
In the first phase of the Freedom to Marry movement on a nationwide basis, the action was in courts. It was in Hawaii, in Vermont, in Massachusetts, in Connecticut, and a bunch of other states. One of the criticisms was, that's undemocratic. You're trying to override the will of the people by, and I don't think it's undemocratic. I think courts have a responsibility to uphold constitutions. That's what courts do. But I understood the sentiment, and to be able to do it in a State House, to be able to take the conversation to a political branch that's accountable to the people, and to be able to win there, I think sent a powerful message around the country to other state houses. And Vermont wasn't the last to do it that way. Others followed, and I think it really set an example.
Last words. What message do you have for our audience? The time has flown by, of course.
I think the thing that I learned from what we went through then, and that is topical today as well, is we weren't successful because we were so effective at vilifying people who disagreed with us. We were successful because we worked very hard to try to understand the real concerns that motivated people, maybe who were actively opposed or people who were undecided and on the fence. And rather than pointing fingers and calling people names, we worked very hard to try to understand their concerns and find common ground. And that was the right message then, and I know these are different times, and so, who knows, but for me, I think that was a valuable lesson.
Beth Robinson, please come again.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank
Same
you.
here.
What a great interview, and what a wonderful, nice person too.
Yeah.
She-
I hope
Really.
she'll come on again.
So do I. And Beth always approaches interviews and conversations with such modesty and humility.
Yeah.
She, by example, showed all of us who were working at Freedom to Marry how to interact with everyone around us in a manner that allowed conversation. It was not challenging. It was not confronting. People could really talk about their beliefs and what was difficult for them, which was an amazing process.
And what was extraordinary is before the interview, she asked us about ourselves. Although
Yeah.
she knows Keith, they're an old friend. We should
They're old friends,
echo
yes.
the shout out to him that occurred in the interview.
And now we have trivia in the last minute and a half. So
Okay.
let's go.
What's the answer?
December 2009, Burlington Free Press, Vermonter of the Year, just might have been Beth Robinson for her work on marriage equality.
3 cheers.
Yes. And on that note, we're going to say,
Resist.
resist.